The boardroom walls pressed against my chest as Helen Morrison from Human Resources slid the termination packet across the polished wood surface. My pulse monitor beneath my blazer registered the familiar flutter that meant my damaged heart was struggling again, but I kept my expression steady. "We're transitioning toward a younger demographic alignment," Helen explained, her voice carrying that practiced corporate sympathy that meant absolutely nothing. "This restructuring reflects our commitment to innovative perspectives. 26 years with this marketing firm, 26 years of campaigns that boosted their revenue from 12 million to over 200 million annually. Through 3 separate cardiac episodes that should have killed me, I maintained flawless project delivery. While other executives took sick days for minor headaches, I worked from my hospital bed, typing proposals between morphine doses." The conference room door opened, and Helen's face brightened. "Perfect timing. I'd like you to meet your replacement." The young man who walked in had sandy hair and nervous energy that reminded me of a golden retriever puppy. Fresh graduate confidence radiated from every gesture as he approached with an outstretched hand. "This is Trevor Hartwell," Helen announced. "Trevor just completed his master's degree at Northwestern, and his portfolio shows exactly the fresh thinking we need moving forward." I studied Trevor's face carefully. The same angular jaw, the same green eyes that had stared back at me from newspaper photographs 22 years ago. The same features that belonged to his father, Michael Hartwell, whose drunk driving had stolen my 18-year-old daughter Emma from this world. "Mrs. Patterson, such an honor to meet you," Trevor said, pumping my hand enthusiastically. "I've studied several of your campaigns in graduate school. The tourism boost you created for Northern Michigan was brilliant." His genuine excitement might have been touching under different circumstances. Here was a young man thrilled about landing his dream position, completely unaware that every step of his journey had been carefully orchestrated by the woman whose life his father had destroyed. Before I dive deeper into what happened next, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you're listening from? Because I want to know where my story is reaching across the world. And please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell, because what I'm about to share with you will change how you think about patience, justice, and the lengths a mother will go to honor her child's memory. I leaned closer to Trevor, close enough that Helen couldn't hear my words. "Your father killed my daughter 22 years ago. Drunk driving." Emma was heading to her college interview at University of Chicago. The color drained from Trevor's face like water flowing down a drain. His hand went limp in mine, but I held it firmly, maintaining that professional handshake while his world shifted beneath his feet. "I've spent 2 decades making sure you'd end up exactly here, in this position, at this moment," I continued in a whisper that could have been mistaken for friendly advice to any observer. Trevor's eyes darted between my face and Helen, who was gathering papers and chattering about transition timelines. I could see him trying to process whether this was some cruel joke or impossible coincidence. "The scholarship that paid for your undergraduate degree?" I said quietly. "The one from the Morrison Educational Foundation? I established that fund. Your application was the only one they received because I made sure of it." Trevor's breathing became shallow. The tremor in his hand told me he was beginning to understand that coincidences this massive don't exist in the real world. "The internship at Bradley Marketing in Detroit," I continued. "The one where the original candidate mysteriously withdrew 3 days before starting. I bought out his student loans and offered him a better position in Seattle. Couldn't risk him taking the experience you needed to build your resume." Helen glanced up from her paperwork. "Everything all right over there? You two seem to be getting along wonderfully." "Just sharing some industry insights," I replied with a warm smile. Trevor reminds me so much of myself at his age. The irony wasn't lost on me. Trevor did remind me of my younger self, back when I believed hard work and talent were enough to guarantee success. Before I learned that sometimes justice requires decades of patience and planning. "The recommendation letter from Professor Williams at Northwestern," I whispered to Trevor. "The one that secured your graduate program admission? Professor Williams retired 8 years ago. I wrote that letter myself. Took me 3 months to perfect his writing style and another 2 months to arrange the letterhead through a contact in their alumni office." Trevor's face had gone beyond pale into a grayish color that made me worry he might faint. I loosened my grip on his hand slightly, not wanting to create a scene that would interrupt my carefully planned revelation. Your thesis advisor, Dr. Rebecca Chen, who happened to specialize in exactly the marketing strategies you needed to impress employers like us, I funded her research position. She genuinely doesn't know about our connection, but her guidance shaped you into precisely the candidate this company would find irresistible. The beautiful part about my plan was how much of Trevor's success was real. He truly was talented. His ideas were fresh and innovative. His work ethic was impressive. But talent without opportunity means nothing, and I had spent 22 years ensuring Trevor would have every opportunity he needed to reach this exact moment. The apartment you're living in downtown, I continued. The one with rent so affordable it seemed too good to be true? The landlord is my brother-in-law. He's been losing money on that property for 2 years, but I've been covering the difference. Had to make sure you could afford to live close enough to commute here easily. Helen stood up and stretched. I'm going to grab some coffee. Can I bring either of you anything? I'm fine, thank you, I said, never breaking eye contact with Trevor. Trevor opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. He cleared his throat and tried again. Coffee would be great. Black, please. As soon as Helen left the room, Trevor found his voice. This is insane. You can't have controlled my entire life. There's no way someone could plan something this elaborate. Your college girlfriend, Amy, I said. The one who broke up with you right before graduation? I hired a private investigator to find out everything about your relationships. Amy was planning to propose marriage. I couldn't risk you settling down in Chicago when you needed to be here in Grand Rapids. So I arranged for her to receive a full scholarship to graduate school in California, along with a research position that required her to start immediately. Trevor's eyes filled with tears. Amy said she couldn't turn down the opportunity. She said it came out of nowhere, like a miracle. Miracles are usually just careful planning disguised as luck, I replied. Amy never knew about my involvement. She made the choice that seemed best for her future, just like you made the choice to apply for this position, because it seemed perfect for your career goals. The conference room door opened again, and Helen returned with a steaming mug. She handed it to Trevor, who accepted it with trembling hands. You'll want to be caffeinated for your first week, Helen said cheerfully. Patterson has left some incredibly detailed project files. The transition should be seamless. About those project files, I said to Trevor, my voice still low enough that Helen couldn't hear clearly. You'll want to pay special attention to the Meridian Development account. 8 years of invoicing, all perfectly documented. The only problem is that Meridian Development doesn't exist. Trevor's coffee mug slipped from his fingers and shattered against the hardwood floor. The dark liquid spread across the boards like spilled blood. Oh my goodness, Helen exclaimed, rushing to grab paper towels from the cabinet. Don't worry about it, Trevor. First-day nerves happen to everyone. While Helen cleaned the mess, I leaned even closer to Trevor. $2.7 million in payments to a completely fictional company. The bank account, the business license, the billing address, all legitimate on paper, all leading back to whoever holds administrative access for this position. Your access credentials, starting Monday morning. Trevor's face had moved beyond pale into a sickly green that suggested he might vomit at any moment. I handed him a napkin from the conference table. The FBI Financial Crimes Division receives anonymous tips every day, I whispered. Someone familiar with the company's bookkeeping practices might notice unusual patterns in vendor payments. Someone who had decades of experience with these accounts might spot discrepancies that a younger, less experienced person would miss. Helen finished cleaning and tossed the soaked paper towels into the wastebasket. There we go. Good as new. Trevor, are you feeling all right? You look a bit under the weather. Just excited about getting started, Trevor managed to say. Sometimes excitement makes me nauseous. Perfectly understandable, Helen replied. Patterson, do you have any final words of wisdom for our rising star? I stood up and gathered my personal items from the conference table. 26 years of my professional life fit into a single cardboard box. Photos of successful campaigns, awards for innovation, thank you notes from clients whose businesses I had transformed. None of it mattered compared to what I was about to accomplish. Trevor, I said, loud enough for Helen to hear, remember that success in this industry comes from understanding your client's deepest needs. Sometimes people don't even realize what they need until someone shows them. I turned back to Trevor with what I'm sure appeared to be a grandmotherly smile. Also, remember that every action has consequences, and some consequences take longer to appear than others. The most important lesson I can share is that patience always pays off if you're willing to wait long enough. Helen beamed. What wonderful advice! I can already tell you two are going to work beautifully together during this transition period. Actually, I said, I think Trevor is ready to take on full responsibility immediately. No need for a lengthy transition. He has everything he needs to succeed. Trevor's eyes were wide with panic, but he couldn't protest without raising Helen's suspicions about our conversation. Are you sure? Helen asked. We had planned for 2 weeks of overlap. Completely sure, I replied. Trevor's background has prepared him perfectly for this role. He understands exactly what's expected of him. I walked around the conference table and stopped directly in front of Trevor. One last thing, I said, extending my hand for a final handshake. Emma would have been 40 years old next month. She wanted to be a pediatric nurse. Every year on her birthday, I visit children's hospitals and donate medical equipment in her memory. Trevor's hand was cold and clammy when he shook mine. This year, for the first time in 22 years, I won't be making that donation alone, I continued. Because finally, Emma's story will have an ending. I released Trevor's hand and turned toward the door. Helen, thank you for everything. This company gave me a wonderful career, and I know it will give Trevor exactly what he deserves. As I reached the conference room entrance, I paused and looked back at Trevor one final time. Oh, and Trevor? The audit team arrives Monday morning at 8 o'clock sharp. I'd recommend getting a good lawyer this weekend. You're going to need one. The last thing I saw before leaving was Trevor's face crumpling as the full weight of his situation crashed down on him. 22 years of careful planning, and it was finally time to watch it all unfold. I walked past my former office, past the receptionist who wished me well in retirement, past the elevator, where I had suffered my second heart attack 3 years earlier while working on a presentation that earned the company their largest client contract ever. My car was waiting in the parking structure where I had sat crying 22 years ago after learning that Michael Hartwell would serve only 18 months for vehicular manslaughter because Emma had been jaywalking when he struck her. The prosecutor had explained that Michigan's drunk driving laws were weaker then, that proving intent was difficult, that families like mine just had to accept imperfect justice. But I never accepted it. I spent 2 decades building something bigger than justice. I created inevitability. As I drove away from the building for the last time, my phone buzzed with a text message from my cardiologist, reminding me about Monday's appointment to discuss my latest test results. The irony wasn't lost on me that my damaged heart, the same heart that had nearly killed me 3 times, had given me the patience to wait long enough to see this plan through to completion. Trevor would spend the weekend discovering that every success in his life had been purchased with my grief. By Monday morning, he would understand that some debts compound across generations, and some patience runs deeper than revenge. It becomes justice. The best part? Trevor was genuinely innocent of his father's crime. He had been 6 years old when Michael Hartwell's drunk driving killed Emma, which meant that everything Trevor was about to lose, his career, his freedom, his future, would be lost for something he had no control over. Just like Emma had no control over being in that crosswalk at the exact moment when Michael Hartwell decided to drive home after drinking for 4 hours at a company party. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. The caller ID showed Helen Morrison's number. Patricia? Helen's voice was tight with confusion. I need to ask you something strange. Trevor is insisting that you said something about his father and your daughter. He seems very upset and he's not making much sense. Did something happen in the conference room? I sat in my car, looking at the house where Emma had lived for 18 years. Her bedroom window still faced the street, still had the white curtains she had chosen for her 16th birthday. Helen, I said carefully, I think Trevor might be overwhelmed by his new responsibilities. Starting a new position can be very stressful, especially for someone his age. Sometimes stress makes people imagine things that didn't actually happen. That's what I figured, Helen replied, relief evident in her voice. He's asking about audit teams and fictional companies and all sorts of bizarre things. I told him he needs to go home and get some rest before Monday. That sounds like excellent advice, I agreed. Trevor just needs time to adjust to his new reality. After Helen hung up, I sat in my driveway until the sun set behind Emma's bedroom window. Tomorrow I would visit her grave and tell her that the man who killed her was about to watch his son's life destroyed piece by piece, just like ours had been destroyed in that split second 22 years ago. Some people would call what I did cruel. They would say that Trevor didn't deserve to pay for his father's mistakes. They would argue that revenge never brings back the dead. They would be right about that last part, but they would miss the deeper truth. Justice isn't about bringing back the dead. Justice is about ensuring that actions have appropriate consequences, even if those consequences take decades to arrive, especially if they take decades to arrive. Because the longer you wait, the more devastating the impact when everything finally comes crashing down. Monday morning arrived with that crisp October air that always reminded me of Emma's favorite season. She loved how the leaves turned colors before letting go, said it proved that endings could be beautiful if you approached them with the right attitude. I was brewing my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed with the first text message from Trevor. Just 3 words, "Please call me." I deleted it without responding. The second message arrived 10 minutes later. "I know you're getting these. We need to talk." Then a third. I found the scholarship documents. The letterhead was fake. I smiled as I scrolled through the growing list of messages. Trevor had clearly spent his weekend doing exactly what I had hoped he would do, investigating every detail of his life, discovering fingerprint after fingerprint of my involvement. The internship coordinator in Detroit says no one named Patterson ever contacted them about me. Amy never applied for that California scholarship. She says someone called her pretending to be from the university. My landlord is your brother-in-law. His name is on the property records. Each message revealed another piece of the puzzle Trevor was frantically trying to solve. But the beautiful thing about spending 22 years planning something is that you have time to make sure every piece fits perfectly. At exactly 7:45 that morning, my phone rang. Trevor's number appeared on the screen, and this time I answered. "Good morning, Trevor," I said pleasantly. "How was your weekend?" "You have to stop this," he said immediately. His voice carried the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept in days. "Whatever you think you're accomplishing, it's not going to bring your daughter back." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "Nothing will bring Emma back. But your father is still alive, still living comfortably in his retirement home in Florida, still collecting Social Security benefits and pension payments from the trucking company that employed him for 35 years after he killed my child." Trevor was quiet for several seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. "My father has dementia. He doesn't even remember what happened that night." "How convenient for him," I replied. "Emma doesn't have the luxury of forgetting anything, because she doesn't have the luxury of being alive." "But I was 6 years old." Trevor's voice cracked. "I didn't even know what drunk driving was. How can you punish me for something I had no control over?" I set down my coffee cup and walked to Emma's bedroom, which I had preserved exactly as she left it 22 years ago. Her college application materials were still scattered across her desk, including the University of Chicago information packet she had been studying the night before her interview. "Do you know what Emma's last words were?" I asked Trevor. He didn't respond. "She called me from the hospital after the paramedics stabilized her. The doctors said she had maybe 20 minutes before internal bleeding would shut down her organs. So Emma used those 20 minutes to call me and say she was sorry." My voice remained steady despite the tears running down my cheeks. After 22 years, I could tell this story without breaking. She apologized for jaywalking. She apologized for not looking both ways carefully enough. She apologized for ruining her college interview opportunity. My daughter spent her final conscious moments on Earth apologizing for being the victim of someone else's terrible decision. Trevor's breathing was ragged on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry that happened to her. But destroying my life won't change any of it." "You're wrong about that," I said, walking back to my kitchen window where I could see the neighbor children waiting for their school bus. "Destroying your life changes everything. because it means that Michael Hartwell's action finally has an appropriate consequence. He went to prison, 18 months in minimum security. He served 11 months and got early release for good behavior. 11 months, Trevor. Emma was 18 years old. Your father served less than 1 month for every year of life he stole from her. I heard Trevor make a sound that might have been a sob. But more importantly, I continued, your father got to watch you grow up. He got to attend your high school graduation, your college graduation, your graduate school ceremonies. He got to be proud of your accomplishments and excited about your future. All the things I will never experience with Emma. Through my kitchen window, I watched a black sedan pull into the company parking structure across town. I knew exactly who was in that car because I had been coordinating with them for 6 months. The audit team just arrived at your office, I told Trevor. Special Agent Rodriguez from the FBI Financial Crimes Division, along with 2 forensic accountants and a computer specialist. They'll be setting up in Conference Room B, the same room where we met on Friday. How do you know that? Trevor's voice was barely a whisper. Because I called them. 6 months ago, I submitted a detailed report about suspicious vendor payments at my former company. The report included bank records, forged invoices, and a complete timeline of financial irregularities dating back 8 years. I had spent 3 years learning forensic accounting through online courses and community college classes. My damaged heart made returning to school difficult, but rage is an excellent motivator for pushing through physical limitations. The beautiful part, I continued, is that everything I reported is completely true. The Meridian Development account does exist. The payments were made exactly as documented. The only fictional element is that Meridian Development isn't actually a legitimate business. Trevor's silence told me he was beginning to understand the scope of what I had constructed. I created that company 8 years ago, filed all the proper paperwork, established business banking accounts, even created a professional website with fake employee profiles. Every invoice submitted to your company was legitimate in format and appearance. The only problem is that Meridian Development never provided any actual services. But how did you authorize payments without access to the company systems? Trevor asked. I didn't authorize them, I said. Helen Morrison did. Every payment was properly approved through standard company procedures. The invoices were submitted through our normal vendor portal. Helen signed off on them because they appeared to be legitimate charges for marketing consultation services. This was the part of my plan that had required the most patience. For 8 years, I had submitted small invoices, 5,000 here, 8,000 there, amounts large enough to add up significantly over time, but small enough that no single payment would trigger additional scrutiny. Helen thought she was approving payments for marketing research and demographic analysis. I explained. The invoices included detailed descriptions of services that sounded plausible to someone without specific expertise in those areas. So why aren't you in trouble? Trevor demanded. If you created the fake company and submitted the invoices, why am I the one being investigated? Because the banking records show that all payments were authorized by whoever held administrative access to the vendor management system. For the past 8 years, that was me. But as of Friday afternoon, that access transferred to you. I could hear Trevor's sharp intake of breath as the trap revealed its final mechanism. When you signed your employment paperwork on Friday, you didn't just accept a new position. You accepted responsibility for all vendor relationships and payment authorizations associated with that position. The FBI's investigation will show that someone used legitimate company procedures to embezzle nearly $3 million over 8 years. But I wasn't even working there, Trevor protested. Which makes it even more suspicious, I replied. The investigators will want to know how someone who wasn't employed at the company managed to set up such an elaborate fraud scheme. They'll ask questions about whether you had inside help, whether this was a long-term plan, whether other employees were involved. Through my window, I could see more cars arriving at the company building. Local police, additional federal agents, probably representatives from the district attorney's office. When you steal nearly $3 million from a company, it creates a substantial law enforcement response. The bank account for Meridian Development, I continued, was opened using a fake identification card with your name on it. The account signature matches samples of your handwriting that I collected from various applications over the years. That's impossible. I never opened any bank account. Of course you didn't. But the bank has surveillance footage of someone who looks remarkably like you opening the account 3 months ago. Amazing what you can accomplish with professional makeup and the right clothing. I had hired a private investigator who specialized in corporate fraud cases. She had connections with people who could create convincing documentation and had experience with identity manipulation for undercover work. Everything was technically illegal, but proving it would require resources and expertise that most defense attorneys don't possess. The really clever part, I said, is that the account was opened using your current address, the apartment my brother-in-law rents to you. So the bank's records will show that whoever opened the account lives exactly where you live. Trevor was crying now. I could hear the tears in his voice when he spoke. Please, I'll do anything you want. I'll pay back the money somehow. I'll work for free. Just don't let this happen. The money's already gone, I said. I donated every penny to children's hospitals over the past 8 years. Pediatric cardiac units, specifically. The same kind of unit where Emma died. This was true. I had kept meticulous records of every donation, made sure each contribution was properly documented for tax purposes. In a strange way, Trevor's future destruction had already saved dozens of children's lives through the medical equipment his fake company had purchased. So even if you could somehow prove your innocence, I continued, the money can't be returned because it's been converted into heart monitors and surgical equipment and medication that's already been used to treat sick children. My phone beeped with a text message from Helen Morrison. Emergency meeting at 9 a.m. FBI is here asking questions about vendor payments. Need you to come in immediately. I showed the message to my empty kitchen and laughed out loud for the first time in 22 years. Helen wants me to come in and help explain the Meridian Development account, I told Trevor. She thinks my experience with vendor management will help clarify any confusion. You can't do this, Trevor whispered. Please, I have a younger sister. She's starting college next year. My parents have been saving for decades to pay her tuition. If I go to prison, they'll have to spend everything on legal fees. Emma had a younger brother, I replied. Tommy was 15 when she died. He spent his junior and senior years of high school watching his parents fall apart from grief. His grades suffered so badly that he couldn't get into any decent colleges. He ended up dropping out after one semester because he couldn't concentrate on anything except Emma being gone. I walked back to Emma's room and picked up the framed photograph from her dresser. She was wearing her high school graduation cap and gown, smiling with the confidence of someone who believed the future held infinite possibilities. Tommy works at a warehouse now, I continued. He never married, never had children, never recovered from losing his sister. Your father didn't just kill Emma that night. He destroyed my entire family's future. But my sister has nothing to do with what my father did. Neither did Tommy. Neither did my husband, who died of a heart attack 2 years after Emma's death because grief literally broke his heart. Neither did I, when my own heart started failing from the stress of losing everything I cared about. Trevor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was defeated. What happens now? Now you go to your office and meet with the FBI? I said. You answer their questions honestly. You tell them you have no idea how nearly $3 million was stolen using your identity and access credentials. Will you be there? Oh yes. Helen specifically requested my assistance with the investigation. I'll be sitting right next to you, helping explain how vendor payments work, sharing my expertise about detecting financial irregularities. I could picture Trevor's face as he realized that his tormentor would be present for his destruction, disguised as his ally. The irony is beautiful, I said. For the next several hours, I'll be working very hard to help you prove your innocence. I'll share every detail I know about the Meridian Development account. I'll explain exactly how someone could have manipulated the vendor system. I'll be your strongest advocate. Why would you help me? Because helping you will make your situation worse. Every detail I provide will demonstrate how sophisticated this fraud scheme was, how much planning it required, how someone would need extensive inside knowledge to pull it off. The more helpful I am, the more obvious it becomes that only someone with your exact access and background could have done this. My doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see a police car in my driveway. "The authorities are here to escort me to the office," I told Trevor. "Standard procedure when they need a former employee to assist with an active investigation. I should go." "Wait," Trevor said desperately. "What about forgiveness? What about moving on? What about being the bigger person?" I paused at my front door, looking one last time at the house where Emma had grown up. "Trevor," I said gently, "I am being the bigger person. I'm giving your father's son the same opportunity for justice that his son's victim received. The only difference is that Emma's justice came accidentally and instantly. Yours was designed carefully and will unfold slowly. This isn't justice. This is revenge." "Justice and revenge aren't opposites," I replied. "Sometimes they're the same thing, separated only by time and planning." I ended the call and opened my front door to greet the officers who would escort me to watch Trevor's world collapse completely. As we drove toward the office building where I had spent 26 years building my career and my plan, I thought about Emma's college application essay. She had written about wanting to become a pediatric nurse because children deserved advocates who would fight for them when they couldn't fight for themselves. 22 years later, I had finally become the advocate Emma needed. The kind who doesn't give up. The kind who understands that some fights take decades to win. The kind who knows that love for your child doesn't end just because their life does. By evening, Trevor would be in federal custody. By next month, he would be facing trial for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy charges that would likely result in 15 to 20 years in prison. By next year, his family would be financially destroyed by legal fees, just like mine had been destroyed by funeral costs and medical bills and the complete inability to function normally after losing everything that mattered. And for the first time since Emma died, I would sleep peacefully, knowing that justice had finally arrived. Maybe some of you think what I did was wrong. Maybe you believe that forgiveness is more important than accountability. Maybe you think I should have found a way to move forward without destroying an innocent young man's life. But here's what I want you to understand. Emma was innocent too, and unlike Trevor, she never got a second chance. If this story reached you, if it made you think about the people in your own life who matter most, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Tell me in the comments how far this story traveled to reach you, because I want to know that Emma's story is being heard around the world. And remember that the people you love today might not be here tomorrow. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply pay attention to how precious ordinary moments really are. Because once they're gone, all you have left is the choice between acceptance and action. I chose action, and I've never regretted it for a single day.